It's 2 years since the EU referendum in Britain, and the ruling Conservative Party has spent the time fighting and arguing, but mainly with itself. My guest this week here in London is Nicky Morgan, a former education minister and now a pro-Remain Conservative MP. Why does she continue to prop up a Prime Minister who has failed so spectacularly to unite the party and the country? Nicky Morgan, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
It's 2 years since the Brexit referendum, 2 years in which the government has failed to come up with an agreed position in the cabinet on what kind of Brexit they want. It's a shambles, isn't it?
Well, I think what we've seen is that Brexit is undoubtedly extremely complex. Certainly, backbench members of Parliament like me would like to see more clarity on the future trading relationship between the UK and the EU. Progress has been made on some things, to be fair to both sides, but clearly there's a lot left to negotiate and agree in the remaining months ahead.
Well, I mean, they've been negotiating and fighting with themselves. They haven't been talking to Brussels much. I mean, that's the shambolic aspect of it. It's not just that it's difficult, it's just that they can't agree on what they want, which is pretty shameful, isn't it? This is the future of this country, and the future of this country's economy hinges on what kind of Brexit the UK gets.
Well, I think
you think there'd be a more responsible attitude from the Prime Minister and the government, wouldn't you?
Well, I think as you've just said, this is incredibly important, these negotiations, for the future of the United Kingdom, and particularly, obviously, for the shape of our economy. Clearly, there have been things that have been agreed with the EU in relation to the withdrawal agreement, on the amount to be paid on EU citizens, but the important questions...
Whether the UK back down?
Well, look...
They back down on the sequencing of the talks. They back down on the money.
I'm not here to defend the government, because I'm a backbench member of Parliament and chair of one of the House of Commons major select committees. So I'm here to ask the questions. Well, I'm here to absolutely. I mean, I think that do I think the Conservative Party is the right party to be in government? Absolutely, of course I do. Are there questions about future relationship? Yes, of course there are. Are there things I'd like to be seeing done differently? Absolutely, and that's what MPs are there to do, is to scrutinise the work of the government, to hold the government to account, to stand up for our constituents.
Well, do they? Because, I mean, it's left to business, isn't it? As we've seen in the last few days, the 5 top business lobby groups have come out now and said large companies are queuing up to shift work or investment out of the UK, and this has huge implications for British jobs.
It certainly does, yes.
Why didn't you back them up?
Well, we have, in terms of the last few months, there have been discussions in Parliament on customs arrangements. I led a debate with a colleague from another select committee, Yvette Cooper, who's the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, back in April. And there have obviously been concerns about companies, that companies have raised with us,
but they're
that have been raised
by the lack of progress,
in Parliament.
Aren't they? They're absolutely dismayed. I mean, you say it's just a difficult subject. Absolutely dismayed that this is being mishandled on a daily basis now. And the reaction from the government, from a government minister, is to shut up. Back the Prime Minister.
Yes,
stay quiet.
Absolutely.
It's disgraceful, isn't it?
I was extremely concerned to hear the reaction from 2 senior government ministers about the way in which they said that businesses should not be raising their concerns. We absolutely need to hear from business. And one of the issues over the last couple of years has been that actually it's been the business lobby groups raising the concerns, not businesses themselves. And actually there's no substitute for hearing from the voice of business directly the decisions that they're having to make on the shop floor that are going to affect the future financial security of workers.
But what kind of state do these ministers in your party think this is? I mean, a state where you can hush up critical voices, where a public servant like a minister tells business what it can say and what it can't say. I had this impression I was back in East Germany listening to this.
Well,
is this the state that your party has got this country into?
No, I don't think those ministers were speaking for the majority of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is a pro-enterprise, pro-business party.
The party didn't dissociate itself from what they said, did it?
Well, I'm not.
And the Prime Minister didn't dissociate herself.
Look, I'm not a minister. I'm not a minister.
You
I'm
were,
not here.
but you're not.
I was, but I'm not. I'm not here, as I say. I'm making it very clear what I think of those comments, which I think are inexcusable, because actually it is businesses that employ hundreds of thousands of people across this country, who export and import goods, and who we should be very mindful of the impact of the final Brexit negotiations on what's going to happen, how this country is going to continue to work for them, and more importantly, for their employees who rely on those businesses, large and small, for their financial livelihoods.
We saw the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, who's reported to have told Belgium's ambassador when he was asked about business concerns, I can't use the word, just say F business. Are you proud of Mr. Johnson?
I think that Mr. Johnson, if he said that, and of course it's an anecdotal remark, it is completely uncalled for by the Foreign Secretary, who has himself talked about wanting a global Britain, who has asked Britain's embassies and consulates around the world to be a shop window for the Britain is Great campaign. I think if he said that,
is this an appropriate way for a minister who's holding one of the great offices of state to talk
I've just
business?
made it very clear that I think his remarks are deeply disappointing.
Well, it comes at the end of a long list of remarks that have been deeply disappointing.
And I'm sure that the Prime Minister is extremely mindful of that and keeping
not mindful enough to sack him.
A close tally. Well,
shouldn't he be sacked?
Look, who the Prime Minister has in her cabinet is, as I know from personal experience, very much a matter for her to decide.
Having been sacked by Theresa May yourself?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, shouldn't he be sacked? Do you have an opinion on this or not?
I'm not going to.
You're fairly forthright when you want to be, Nicky Morgan.
Well, exactly. So
why are you tiptoeing around this particular issue?
Because at the end of the day, the issue is not about personalities. It's
I've been very clear. Personalities, whether they're competent to do the job, isn't it?
I've been very clear before that actually this Brexit debate is far more important than talking about one minister or one personality. You know, we shouldn't be endlessly debating this minister or that minister said this. These negotiations are incredibly important, both for the future of the United Kingdom, but also, I would argue, for businesses and others within the EU, and we've got to get that right. And the
but
more
Mrs May's
media
authority
time we
is
spend
being
discussing
flouted
this,
continually on a daily basis, and she either doesn't have the ability, the strength, or the guts to do anything about it.
That is a matter. The Prime Minister is running the Cabinet and she's running the government.
Which is supposed to be running the country.
And as a Member of Parliament, my role there is to represent my constituents and to scrutinise the work of the government, to point out where I think things are going wrong. I'm not going to get into
this is going
debating.
Wrong.
Well,
there is something deeply pathetic, isn't there, about a Prime Minister who cannot control her own ministers.
Well, that's a matter you'd have to raise with the Prime Minister directly. For me
Again, you
and
don't
for
have
my
an
constituents.
You're there to scrutinise. Why don't you
scrutinise?
scrutinise the people who are in the government?
I'm not going to get into debating endlessly certain personalities who love the fact they're being talked about. This is more important for my constituents. Their financial livelihoods and job security will depend on getting the right Brexit deal.
Not even if those
a deal is important.
Not even if those personalities are holding the country to ransom, as they clearly are.
Well, I'm not sure that
that is
holding up
the Brexit process.
I'm not. Well,
and leading it in the wrong way. You've said in the past as a threat to
absolutely.
democracy, but you won't talk about them. You have your clear red lines.
I think what's interesting about this interview is that so far we've spent an awful lot of time talking about one particular personality, not talking about the issues that are at stake. Well, no, we're talking about the issues at stake in the Brexit negotiations. What is the future of the trading relationship? How is London as a global financial centre going to be regulated after Brexit?
Good question, which we haven't in 2 years had an answer to, have we? I mean, isn't the problem that both you and the government seem to believe there's a kind of sort of mythical third way available somewhere between the hardline Brexiteers and the die-hard Remainers, a third way where Britain gets to keep some of the good things it had from the EU membership and doesn't have to obey silly things like rules?
Well, I think this is a negotiation and that both sides actually are in the process of negotiating what that future relationship is going to look like. I'd like to see more progress. I'd like to see more detail. I'd like to know what that means for my constituents. And as chair of the Treasury Select Committee, I'm particularly concerned, obviously, to know what that means for financial services companies too. So those are the questions that need to be debated and answered. And they will be, I think, in the coming weeks. We've got the June EU summit. The Cabinet have an away day. We're waiting for a white paper.
They've had many away days, haven't they?
Well,
and done nothing with them.
Well, there was some movement.
Decisions.
There was some movement in the away day held earlier on this year. But as I say, these are incredibly complex negotiations, and Parliament MPs will have a say on these right the way through. We're about to start debating next month the customs and trade bills, both of which will be very important, as I say, for the financial security of millions of people in this country.
You said in April the Prime Minister's stated objective was to have frictionless trade, and MPs should be able to tease out the best way to achieve this in a calm and rational way. But the problem with that is that frictionless trade has already been turned down by the EU if the UK continues to insist on leaving the single market and the customs union and not accepting free movement. So it's a non-starter, isn't it, this frictionless trade?
Well, I think it's
Why is
going
that
to be
so hard to understand?
It's going to be difficult to achieve, undoubtedly, with all the other parts, exactly as you said, particularly relating, obviously, to free movement and the desire for some people in my party to want to negotiate our own trade deals. But the point is, actually, and I think I said in that debate as well, that the debate was a debate of the government's own making, because these issues hadn't been debated and because there wasn't a clear and agreed cabinet position. I think, actually, there's an awful lot of discussion to be had about the details of customs and potentially single market access, EEA, EFTA membership for people to understand. I think what the EU is looking for is a clear ask from the UK government.
Yeah, and after 2 years they might have expected that they would have it.
Well, that's what we hope will obviously be covered in the white paper the government is due to publish in a couple of weeks.
But why not listen to them when they say that you cannot have sector-by-sector deals without accepting the kinds of EU conditions the UK has turned down? I mean, if you listen to Sir Ivan Rogers, who was Britain's former ambassador to the EU, he'd been told repeatedly over many years that that is not on offer. Mrs. Merkel and others will not agree, he said, to sectoral deals in either the single market or the customs union. So it's a non-starter. But it keeps on being pushed up there.
Well, some people keep
false expectations.
Some people keep on pushing it. I think that actually that is a very valid point, which is actually understanding what the EU, where the negotiations have got to, and that's what we're waiting for in Parliament is an update. You know, we have been told at the weekend in response to the announcements by Airbus and others that negotiations are going well. Well, you know, I hope that Parliament will have an opportunity to be updated on those negotiations very soon. Probably after the EU summit, the Prime Minister will come to Parliament and make her statement next Monday afternoon.
In contrast to the lack of decision-making from the British cabinet, Brussels has been crystal clear, hasn't it? Last December, Michel Barnier sat down with the full authority of the 27 other countries. Mrs. May can't even get her cabinet to agree, but he's got 27 countries. And he said British red lines on leaving the European Court of Justice and ruling out free movement meant that the only option left available was a free trade agreement similar to the one Canada got in 2016. Why not try taking him at his word? That's it. That's all they're offering.
Sadly, I'm not in charge of the negotiations on the UK's side. And of course, what people say publicly, as I know when I was EU budget minister, and what they say privately in Brussels can be two different things. I'm not part of the private negotiations.
But what you have done, you've advanced this so-called mutual recognition model that would maintain cross-border trade in financial services. In January, you suggested throwing down the gauntlet to the EU negotiators. You said, we could say to them that we don't buy their arguments about financial services not being in a free trade agreement. The Canadian agreement has some provisions on services. The only problem with that is that the EU rejected that idea out of hand a month before you said it. Michel Barnier couldn't have been clearer, could he? There's no place for financial services, he said. There's not a single trade agreement that is open to financial services. It doesn't exist.
And yet in March, in the communiqué from the EU Council, there is a little paragraph that opens the way potentially to financial services being part of a free trade agreement.
You've got 27 countries who have to agree. He speaks on behalf of
yes, and that's why it's the March communiqué from the summit. And that's something that I know that financial services companies, both in London and the UK, but also their European counterparts, have been obviously discussing. It's something that we in the Treasury Select Committee have quizzed both the Bank of England and the Financial Conduct Authority about. And I think this model certainly is worth exploring further. Obviously, at the moment, financial services regulations between the two, the UK and the EU27, is obviously absolutely aligned. And so I think it's definitely worth asking the question, well, what, if anything, needs to move? And of course, there's also this issue about global regulatory standards as well. So many of the companies, both in London and on the EU, the continent, will not be following just our own EU regulations and UK regulations. They'll be following global regulations as well. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Well, take the customs union. You want Britain to create a new customs union or partnership or arrangement with the EU because Turkey managed to get one. But Turkey frequently has 10-mile long queues at its borders with Bulgaria. And rather than being a magic wand, having this customs agreement, it doesn't get rid of export declarations, invoices, insurance certificates, transport permits for each EU country that they have to pass through. There's nothing great about having a customs union with the EU, is there?
Well, the point actually is having both a customs arrangement or partnership or whatever it wants to be called, which is something that was anticipated in our party manifesto last year. But also the other point is the regulatory standards.
Along with strong and stable government, I seem to remember.
Yes, that's right. And as we know, we saw the election result, which obviously has made things far more complicated for the government in the course of the EU negotiations.
Isn't it?
Well, there's no point in, I mean, we are where we are. There's no point in revisiting history. There's no demands in the country for a further general election. What there are demands for, I know from standing on doorsteps in my constituency, is for the UK government to proceed with the negotiations and end up with the best possible Brexit deal. So that's why all these things should be very much explored.
But my point is this, in trying to get a solution that placates both Remainers and Brexiteers, Britain seems to be reduced to putting forward ideas that are pretty much unworkable. Is that really the best your party can do?
Well, I think that all options have to be on the table until
even the ones rejected.
Well, I think the understanding is understanding obviously why things are rejected. Look, the Brexit referendum has been hugely divisive in this country, and I do think one of the mistakes made early on was not trying to acknowledge that whilst the Leave campaign had won, 16 million people, 48% of those who voted, had not voted for this. So in trying to bring people together to explain that we would be leaving, but we would do it in a way that was not going to damage completely unnecessarily people's own livelihoods and our economy. That's what we're sort of catching up to now. That's what I expect to be debated both in Parliament and in Cabinet in the next few weeks.
You said in April that the position of the Prime Minister should not now in any way be under threat, and that Theresa May has shown the kind of leadership Labour MPs can only dream about. Frankly, that's fundamentally at odds with reality, isn't it? I mean, just look at the opinion poll. The public aren't buying that line. 54% believe the Tories are ineffective. This is the latest poll commissioned by Prospect magazine. 52% have you fundamentally divided, and less than a third believe that you always put Britain first in your priorities. Ineffective, divided, and failing to put Britain first. Not much of an accolade, is it, from the public?
Well, as I say, as I know from our conversations on doorsteps, Brexit is seen as incredibly complicated. Nobody is calling out there for a change of government or a change of leadership of the Conservative Party.
Why not?
Of course, everybody has
Why
views.
not?
Well, people have views. Because actually what people want in this country is a stable government to get on with the Brexit negotiations. They don't want parties to be indulging.
Doing that.
Well,
they don't have an effective government doing that, do they?
Well, I think actually
a government that can agree with itself.
Well, the Cabinet obviously have to come up very quickly with an agreed position on these issues.
They spent 2 years failing to do that.
Well, the Brexit referendum was just 2 years ago. The negotiations with the EU, as we know, started just a year ago after the general election. And what I was saying there actually was, as I say, there's no appetite within my party or within the wider populace for a change of leadership. And I think if you're going to compare Theresa May's leadership to Jeremy Corbyn's, you will see on the issue of the EU, as with many other things, on the Labour side, an even more divided party than we are. But I'm not sure that partisanship really helps here. The point is that actually what people want, as I say, is the best Brexit deal for the United Kingdom.
And they don't feel they have a chance of getting it, particularly the people who matter in this country, as you said before, the people who employ millions of other people, who have to put consumer goods in the shops, who have to keep the factories working. These are the people who have lost faith in your party and your government.
Well, I think what they're saying at the moment is there's undoubtedly much frustration with how things are panning out and in terms of the process of the negotiations. I think what people are most complaining about, businesses when I talk to them, is the lack of certainty. It's very difficult at the moment to plan for much given the uncertainty surrounding the process. That's why I think the next few weeks are absolutely critical. The summit, the Cabinet Away Day, the white paper that's going to be published, and then the debates in Parliament.
Do you trust the Prime Minister? I mean, you called her last November, what did you say, tone deaf and tin-eared.
Well, that was particularly about an article that had been written, I suspect not by her, but by her advisors.
Well, if you put your name on it, you've got to own up to it, haven't you?
And I'm sure she absolutely would. But it wasn't in terms of going back to what I said just a moment ago about healing divisions in the country after the Brexit referendum. I seem to remember that particular article did not do that. Actually,
do you trust her?
Yes, I do.
Why? I mean, this is the leader who denied just before last year's election that her social policy had changed, when everyone else in the country, including her own ministers, knew that it had. I mean, look what happened a few days ago to the well-respected former Attorney General Dominic Grieve at the height of the recent political frenzy over the Brexit bill. After much argument and negotiation, he settled with the Prime Minister on the text of an agreement, only to find that the next morning the text had changed.
No, he didn't settle with the Prime Minister on text of agreement.
He says he did.
Well, no. I'd be very surprised if he had said that, because I was in the meeting, as were many other members of Parliament, with the Prime Minister when that was being discussed. She made it very clear that there were three parts to an agreed to some wording. She could understand discussing two.
And he had to go back.
That was different. That was a text obviously tabled by government, and I don't think that Dominic personal assurance that the text would be discussed, and that is exactly what happened. But yes, I think that Theresa May wants there to be a deal. I think she wants to get the best possible deal for the country and to try to get over as many divisions as possible. I don't see anybody else in government or in Parliament who would be able to offer anything at this stage that would be worth destabilising the government for in changing any kind of leadership.
At what point will you put the country's interests above those of your party and say, this is enough, I don't have faith in the leadership of this country?
Well,
I mean, your self-appointed role is to scrutinise what's going on. You're not happy with what's going on. The country is not happy with what's going on. At some point, you have to say, as a representative in Parliament, enough is enough, go.
Yeah, potentially, that's what I do have to do.
But at what point will you do that?
Well, I'm not going to sit here, I think it's impossible. One thing that I have learnt
you don't have a red line.
You don't
have a principle.
No, I think over the course of the last 2 years with Brexit and my previous professional career, I've learned that actually setting artificial red lines is a mistake, because actually what's happening, these are a complicated set of negotiations on many, many different issues. Actually, at the end of the day, as an elected representative, my red line is in relation to what's best for my constituents.
Time's running out.
Well, I think the next few weeks are absolutely critical in terms of shaping the future relationship between the UK and the EU.
Looking back over the last 2 years, you were part of David Cameron's cabinet, which approved this referendum. Why did none of you ever ask the kinds of basic questions that people are grappling with now? What if we lose the referendum? What if the party splits? What if Europe applies the rules? What about the Northern Ireland border? Why were none of these questions thought about beforehand?
Well, I can't say that they weren't thought about.
We didn't come to any conclusions.
Well, partly because obviously many of us campaigned in order to remain, and it's difficult if you're campaigning for one thing to gaze into the crystal ball and answer every question that's going to come up. I deeply regret the result, but the result is we in this country obviously had a fair and democratic vote. Difficult, very difficult for people to accept, but I think it is the right thing to do to balance those two now, which is to say, yes, we are going to leave the European Union, but we're not going to do it in a way that's damaging. And if we constantly look back to the past and relive the vote from 2 years ago, then actually I think what happens is that attention is not given to that future relationship between the two parties, which is very important.
What is extraordinary looking back is that David Cameron, the Prime Minister that you served, actually acknowledged during the referendum campaign that a no vote risked what he called destroying Britain's economy and diminishing its standing in the world, literally destroying the UK economy. That was the warning. But he still went ahead and gambled with the future and the prosperity of tens of millions of people without any preparation for the kind of destruction that he warned about. How could you, the cabinet, how could he have been so careless with the fate of so many millions of Britons?
Well, I think it was important to understand the context in which the referendum arose. There were and there still are many, many millions of people in this country who are unhappy about the relationship with the EU, with our membership, and they wanted to leave. That had become a defining issue.
It wasn't a top issue with the voters. It was a top issue in the Conservative Party. It never was with the voters.
Well, it was rising up, if you remember.
When he started talking about it.
Remember his first
party speech,
out of it.
I'm fed up with people in my party banging on about Europe. This was all done to clear the air in your party.
No, it was done to clear the air.
That's why the country is suffering from it
in
now.
The election. Look, I deeply regret, as somebody who campaigned vigorously for Remain, I regret very much the decision that was taken. But it is important
to hold the referendum.
Well, I regret very much the decision taken to leave the European Union, and that was the vote. But holding the referendum was done for the best. It was an issue that kept coming up time and time again on elections, on doorsteps. It was something where people under the age of 60 had not had a vote.
Pushed it. David Cameron pushed it. He wanted to clear the air in the party.
I think it wasn't clearing the air in the country. Absolutely, it was an issue that people were mentioning more and more on doorsteps in the Midlands constituencies like mine and elsewhere. And it was an issue which was coming to the exclusion of all other issues. But obviously, I very much regret the fact that it was not the Remain campaign that won, that we're in the middle of these complexities now. And we've got to make sure that Parliament steps up to the plate, scrutinises the deal, holds the government to account, and also gets the best possible deal that builds the best possible future relationship with the EU.
Nicky Morgan, good to have you on Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.